So why Bitcoin actually really matters, right? It matters for human rights and economic justice. So you see a lot of, there's this term, this phrase bandied around now called the SJW movements. So politically correct babies that cry about everything. If they were to learn about Bitcoin, they would become economic justice warriors overnight and throw away their social justice aspirations, because at the end of the day, all injustice is economic. If you can solve economic justice, you've solved social justice. You give people a job, you give people dignity, you don't spy on people, you don't censor people, you don't shut them out of their banking industry. That's why it's important. We have very good in the West. We don't really actually, we're just getting lied to. So we don't have to worry about having a stable currency, which is completely bullshit. When I came back from my MBA, one Aussie dollar would buy me $1.01. Now it buys me 67 cents. So we don't actually even have a stable currency. That's a 33% drop. Granted, it's over a long time, but that's a 33% drop. We don't have to worry about totalitarian governments spying on us and all of that. But with that said, the Australian backdoor encryption laws is probably the most draconian measure in the whole world, maybe possibly even worse than China. China just spies. Australia legally mandates you to allow someone to spy on you. What's it called? The access something or other, right to invasion of privacy. So we don't have to worry about corrupt politicians confiscating our property here. Probably the Supreme Court would step in for us. But it isn't the case. All of this stuff that we don't have to worry about in the West doesn't apply to 5 billion people living under dictators, living under anything, not having a banking system, poor economy, you name it. So for these 5 billion people, Bitcoin gives them the chance of being self-sovereign and to be able to, store and move their wealth in an unconfiscatable and uncensored way. So for example, I'll give you an example of the Jews in World War II Europe. So they had everything confiscated by the Nazis. But the ones that knew like some good chemistry used to make aqua d'or, which means gold water. So what you do is you make a chemical suspension, you melt all your gold in this water, in this suspension, and the jar of it just looks like yellow water. So the Nazis would come through, have a look for stuff to confiscate. They wouldn't have a second look at the gold water. And once the danger was done, or they could transfer it, they put some flocculants and whatever, and the gold sinks to the bottom of the solution, and there's your gold moved without confiscation. That's a lot harder to do now, and not everybody has the means to do that. But if you can remember 12 words in your head, you can carry $1 billion in your head and walk around with it. I wouldn't recommend doing that, because if you get copper knocked to your head, you'd lose everything. So no matter how volatile Bitcoin is, at least it's upwardly volatile, and that's what we showed. And it decreases in inflation all the time. We're effectively at zero inflation in like another 5 or 6 years. Not so much for other countries though, so let's have a look at the World Championships of Inflation from 1980. So, Bolivia, oh look at Bolivia go! Nosed out in front. Nicaragua said, hold my beer. And there she goes. Peru on the inside, Brazil following close by. Oh, look at Congo go. Russia creeping up. Ukraine now. Congo the big favorite to win this race. Angola, Bulgaria doing its time. Belarus. Oh, here's Congo making a comeback. No, Angola on show. Zimbabwe. Post-war Iraq, obviously, was in high contention for this race. Congo back in the lead. Belarus. Venezuela coming in strong on the inside. Venezuela. Oh, look at it go. So far this year, it's done another 1,000,000% in Venezuela. And this country has more oil than Saudi Arabia. So something to think about if you're a socialist. So Bitcoin needs to just be stable enough for the unbanked to rely on it for a circular economy. And you can take it to the bank. Bitcoin is more reliable than the Venezuelan bolivar and probably about 90 other countries. So Bitcoin has dropped from its all-time high. Well, actually, I'll talk about that when we get into investment. I'll talk about why Bitcoin actually isn't down that much. So just simply by buying and holding Bitcoin, you're providing this stability to the price that allows circular investments to happen, and you could actually be giving to the world's biggest humanitarian charity in history. There is no other charity like it where you can donate and enrich yourself as well. So not only enrich your soul through your donations, but also enrich yourself economically to have more power to affect the change you want to see. So the regular holder presents a flaw to the ecosystem, and we'll be talking a lot more about regular savings and dollar cost averaging when we get to the final act. So why Bitcoin is the money of the people? So it is the money of the people, and it fought off its biggest social attack in its history in August 2017, and the people proved they were up to the task and did win the war. So when it was proven that the Bitcoin was the people's money, Bitcoin tore off on a bull run that saw the price get to $20,000 US from only the $3,000 or $2,000 mark it was at that point. This was known as the user-activated soft fork, where it was the users, not the users particularly, the node users specifically, versus the Bitcoin establishment. So the Bitcoin establishment were the big mining companies, the big exchanges, all of these big, VC-funded broking firms and all of that. I don't know if anyone's ever looked up a Wikipedia article on any war. This is the Wikipedia version presentation of what happened. So it happened on the 1st of August. The location wasn't the node users, obviously. The location was the internet. I messed that one up. The victor was the people, the node users, and the result was activation of segregated witness, which was a highly contentious, or not highly contentious amongst the people, it was highly contentious amongst the establishment, because it would mean a lower cut for them, cheaper fees, more throughput. So they didn't like it. They wanted more fees and bigger blocks, and they did that through the convening of the New York Agreement, and I'll talk about all that later. So yeah, and the result was the creation of an imitation coin called Bitcoin Cash, which split into Bitcoin Cash ABC and Bitcoin Cash SV, and it split again last night. But people still buy it. I don't know why. Probably promises of 100x their investment, but I can tell you it'd probably be 100% loss. So who are the commanders and leaders on the Bitcoin team? It was just some random Twitter anon. Wrote up some code, and he told the node users, if you want to keep blocks to 1 megabyte and activate segregated witness, here's how you vote. And if you don't want it, the establishment will get what they want. And the node users got behind Shell and Fry, ran the code, and on August the 1st we won. No casualties. The Axis lost billions of dollars through just wasted money marketing and killing their they had billions of dollars in their court to fight us, and they lost 100 million because of it. They had the majority of the mining power. They had software in their mining machines which broke the social contract, so they were cheaters as well. And yeah, they lost $100 million in this fight trying to take over Bitcoin. They lost all their credibility, and we won. And when people saw that no one can take this away from the node users, all of a sudden the utility Bitcoin was worth 10 times more. So the criticality of running your own node cannot be understated, especially if you have a decent amount invested in Bitcoin. Because at any time someone comes for us, your node is your sword. And we'll revisit nodes more in the final act. But now you've had an idea of the characters, the users, the miners, the nodes. The nodes are the ultimate force on the blockchain. So that's the end of Act 3. So any questions for me? Absolutely.
The anti-money laundering policy.
Yes.
The attack on anonymity, which was the major strength of Bitcoin transaction.
Go on. So Bitcoin's a pseudonymous system, not anonymous. So with some good police work, and there's chain analysis companies now that do it, if you slip up, you'll get caught. Just requires some good police work. Now, layer 2 though in the stack, so if you're on Lightning Network, that is anonymous. So that might present a problem, but people always ask me, what happens if like government doesn't let Bitcoin happen? And I say, well, what happens if Bitcoin doesn't let government happen? So the KYC, AML, like if you want to buy Bitcoin in Australia from an exchange, like you have to go through the anti-money laundering and KYC. But to stay truly private on Bitcoin is actually it's a Herculean effort.
Yeah.
So you're pseudonymous, but the privacy is pretty low. So if somebody can just track one transaction to you, they'll just know your transaction history. But privacy is improving. So that protocol update that's coming, Schnorr and Taproot, will allow batching of signatures. So your transactions get batched in with other people's, and it allows more improvements related to privacy. But there'll be a lot more privacy coming to layer 1, and all other layers in the stack will be completely anonymous. But you couldn't, for example, send $10,000 through the Lightning Network. You could probably send $500 max at this point.
In New Zealand, cryptocurrency has been officially recognised as an asset and can now be paid as wages,
Yep.
As remuneration. So there's a real uptake of using the technology in emerging countries.
And I've heard there's no capital gains in New Zealand. Is that true?
Depends on how creative your accounting is.
Okay, yeah. Oh, you can pay for a creative accountant. You're all right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that anti-money laundering policy is still
Look, people are going to kill me for hearing me say this. Look, if you're not doing anything wrong, like don't worry about it. But the problem is, like it might not be wrong now, and then in 10 years a dictator comes along and says, you know what, this is wrong, and they might, put you in a prison camp for something you did 10 years ago. But at the same time, when you use your credit card, that all goes on your statement, all of that kind of stuff. But there'll be a lot more privacy coming to Bitcoin. But Bitcoin now is effectively like email in 1990. Like no one could really use it. And then, 94, 95, Yahoo Mail and all that kind of stuff, and it just became easier to use. I do see Bitcoin becoming like probably private by default in maybe 3 to 4 years. You got to remember, because there's so much money at play, protocol improvement and consensus takes ages. So like this improvement, Schnorr, has been in the pipeline now for 2 years, and it's just had its now opening code review and comment period, and there's I think 1,000 people reviewing it now, and they have, their review window is another like 3 months. Then there'll be like a 6-month testing window, because money's at play. You don't want, something to go wrong. And then after that, the nodes will have to signal if they want to actually integrate this improvement or not. And if there's consensus that everybody likes the improvement, life goes on. If there's not a consensus, a fork will happen.
Sorry, Mike, just have you heard of Dagcoin?
No. Unfortunately, no. No. Sorry.
My question, I don't know if this is relevant for anyone else, but I've always struggled from a Bitcoin perspective around its tangibility, and its usability. Like you said before, one Bitcoin's one Bitcoin, but if you bought it 18 months ago, it was worth 20 grand, and that's the reality, and now it's worth 8 or whatever it is.
But it's still one Bitcoin. It's still 1/21 millionth of all supply.
One shell.
Yeah. Yeah, but shells are garbage because there's true, but there's an unlimited amount of shells. So that's why people stopped using shells.
Yeah. So coming back to the tangibility, because maybe it's just because it's still such in its infancy and there's no utilisation really of it. For me, it's all smoke and mirrors. Like literally, that's
even after all of this.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, because the history is history. Like there's always going to be wars. There's always going to be people think certain things are right and wrong and all that sort of stuff. Personally, I really don't care about any of that. I want to go.
You do though, because you're funding the war with your tax dollars.
Sweet, that's great. If I'm living in a pretty good country, keep doing a great job. I don't get like that stuff doesn't bother me to happen because it's been happening for centuries and it's going to continue to happen for centuries. So it's part of life.
Not with an attitude like that, but anyway, I'll let you go on.
That's fine. That's very cool. So my question's really like, and this is like, you know, there's a gazillion cryptos, like a Dogecoin and all that as well. But for me, when it comes to Bitcoin, and I'm just picking on Bitcoin because, you know, we're talking about, I know there's a gazillion others as well, like the tangibility factor, like how can I actually transact? No one ever seems to be able to give me an answer on that.
Yeah.
Because if I've got a currency, I want to be able to utilize it.
Yeah.
And like, personally, I think you'd be crazy to utilize Bitcoin.
Of course.
Right now.
Yeah, of course.
But then I go, so why have it?
Human rights. So human rights and the Cantillon effect is why we have it. Now, people that don't give a shit about human rights or Cantillon effect, they just won't come to Bitcoin.
It still doesn't, like the human rights factor, like anyone, you can say that about anything. You know what I mean? Like I think personally, and I'm happy to be wrong, I think that's a really weak argument personally, around we're going to change the world and all that. There's really not that much wrong with it. Like we're all a pretty good life.
There's not much wrong with it for 20 million Australians, and personally I couldn't care if a single Australian got into Bitcoin. Like this is for the other 6 billion people.
Yeah.
So,
that's what I'm just trying to like, and it's Bitcoin, and I'm just trying to understand that. Like I know there will be something to be utilized down the track. So am I just naive because it's so early on, or is it that?
So for me, because I've never ever spent any Bitcoin, and anyone who has Bitcoin here, if anybody ever offers you an option to pay in Bitcoin, unless you need anonymity and privacy with what you're buying, spend your garbage Aussie dollars because they're not worth anything. So Bitcoin's main point now is store of value. And if people say it's a poor store of value because it's dropped 55% or whatever it is, wait till you see DCA. When was the first time you heard about Bitcoin?
Oh, probably 3-4 years ago, as long as I've been in the community.
All right, so I'm going to get everyone here to do an exercise in a little bit when I get to DCA, and you'll see why.
Yeah. But that's my thing. Like I'm just trying to understand like what its tangibility is, what its true.
Well, it is. It's intangible, and its value is. If I have $1 billion that I want to send without anyone knowing about it, this is very valuable to me. If I'm a very, 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 very rich Syrian and the country's gone to shit and I need to go out with my, big bank balance, having Bitcoin is very, very useful for me. And Bitcoin is useful to a lot of people. So I've shown you there's $3 quadrillion floating around. So Bitcoin is a huge hedge, and it's useful for people. I can't get into all the examples of its utility, but anything with utility is worth something. So Bitcoin now at $0.17 trillion of market cap is only 3 times bigger than Uber. Smaller than Facebook, smaller than all this. So it's a minnow that still needs a long time in its life, and we'll get to its life when I analogize Bitcoin to a startup. So.
Do you want to just finish?
I hear what John's saying in terms of tangibility, and I think that's because our society thinks in terms of economics. But I think what House is actually proposing, the premise behind Bitcoin is so much bigger than just economics. I mean, it's offering, and even to use the word humanitarian is going to shut people off from seeing the power of it. I mean, it goes back to the sovereignty that it's offering.
Not just that, how many journalists now have been cancelled for not going along with the groupthink? People on Patreon being cancelled, people taken off YouTube. So WikiLeaks is one of the world's biggest Bitcoin holders. Do you know why? Because MasterCard banned WikiLeaks. No one could get money to them for donations. They're like, all right, we'll take Bitcoin. And back then it was like $50 a Bitcoin, and now like WikiLeaks' legal fund, they have tens of millions of dollars. So like I said, what if government doesn't let WikiLeaks happen? Well, WikiLeaks adopted Bitcoin and now they're not letting government happen. So it's one of those things. So like I said, not a journey of the bank balance, a journey of the soul. Now, if you're happy with the idea of slavery, growth for the sake of growth that's fueling consumption and environmental. So
You cannot say that though. You cannot say that Bitcoin is going to stop slavery. You
that's
can't
fine.
say that. It's like that. I mean,
All I can say is wait and see. That's all I can
You
say.
also can't say that.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. Like the world's the world. That's why I'm like. That's why I'm like. I'm sure there's something there. I just haven't heard it yet. And that's me. And I know like there's probably a gazillion other people out there that are like me that are going. We know that there's something here, but no one's explained it to us in that simple, tangible way without fuck the system and all of this stuff to make it actually right.
It seems like you're more attached to an emotional standpoint than you are interested in listening to what the other.
So
No, I just want to, how am I going to use it viably?
Well, you're looking at it as if you're supposed to use it viably as opposed to what it's going to become. It's like.
It's like an internet.
Look, in terms of when can I spend my Bitcoin, here's the answer. After it IPOs. So we're going to go through now the VC train of Bitcoin as a startup company.
I hope that was okay, everyone.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
I've just ordered a couple of boxing gloves.
I'm definitely a lover, not a fighter, and because I don't like fighting and war.
Yeah, Carl.
Hang on, Brett.
I just want to know, in regards to this becoming private, people don't own this, where do you see this moving forward for governments that supply hospitals, roads, infrastructure? Who's going to do that? Where do you see it?
So I'm a civil engineer, so I'll be happy to build the roads for you, no worries. And I can build one for you for half price that the government can, because I used to work for Transurban and I built the M5. So what you can do is you can do distance charging over Lightning Network. So every kilometer you drive, user pays. Governments are going to have to rationally react to this reality. So they'll have to embrace it. A world-leading country could say, come to Australia and mine Bitcoin off our unlimited solar power. And pay tax in Australia, draw income here.
I'm a blockchain fan.
Yeah.
Do you actually see every country actually creating their own token?
Yes, I do. Simply because it's easier to surveil people with a token than it is with cash. So all governments are going to have their own shitcoin. Every government will have a surveillance coin. Yeah.
Everyone around will be dealing with that shit. Yeah.
So. Like it's not a lie, and it's not a stretch to say, like, if you think we're not being spied on in Australia, like you haven't been watching the news, like that backdoor thing was news everywhere in the world. So we do need it now.
We're also assuming the hospitals and roads are going to be things of the future.
Look, like I said, it's only a brief primer, but in the future when things even out, you will see sort of an income or wealth bell curve, and you'd want, like the Rockefellers did, although they were quite evil, they did abide by this concept called noblesse obligée, which means the obligations of the nobles, and you'll find that the 2 to 3 standard deviations away from the mean will take care of the other 2 to 3 standard deviations away from the mean. So. Look, societal and structural changes come after economic changes. So I don't know how you guys could have been looking at that thing talking about quadrillions and expect the current system to go as planned, and we do need a plan B. But let's go back to Bitcoin.